So as the sun sets slowly over the hills in Saugatuck, as the Kalamazoo River reflects the hills between the river and Lake Michigan, we say good night and have a good weekend. The news is next.
I remember when I used to hear him at the Get Me High Lounge. He struck me as a player who had complete fluency and flexibility and could go any place he wanted to at any time.
He would play off the mic, and he would move around the stage and direct his horn, whether he realized it or not. He was filling the room up with all kinds of indirect sounds.
Lin was a natural improviser, just natural. He didn't have to think about what scale or what chord. He was just there.
Our friend Robert Kester, who I remember recording blues in the early 50s, I think Joe Siegel sort of introduced him to modern music called bebop. And Kester had a recording company by then, and in the 90s, I remember Kester getting us together, and I was able to make a CD with Lin Halliday, and then a year later another one, and all in all, from 90 to 94, we got 4 CDs made together.
I'd like to think we helped get Lin some teeth. The records we made were all made with, as you know, 1 lower tooth and I think 2 uppers or something like that, and they were getting ground away pretty badly.
I don't know, you know, he had 1 little tooth up there toward the end. At least when I knew him, he had a little nub. And he said, I used to use my nub. He used to put the mouthpiece in like this. And he had that ski slope nose, kind of Nixon nose. And he'd get like this. You know, and he'd be playing, and he'd do stuff like that, like you're saying. You know, he'd just like sweep across with the horn.
I remember on the first date in Paul Serrano's old studio, Serrano boxed him in by putting some music stands around and placing him here so where he couldn't move too much, using 2 mics. But you'd still have takes you couldn't use because you had a Doppler effect, you know.
And I said, here's the microphone right there, man. He's... So I put 2 mics on it, and that was enough. But I missed my cue. I should have put a stereo mic on it. But that's when I found out he was as good a musician as he is.
And he came in to do the overdub, and we were all ready to box him in with some of those drum partitions that we used. And we thought, well, let's not do it until we have to. And he played that. He did it awfully well. It may have been 1 take. I wouldn't be surprised. But he played with his, as if his horn was welded to the microphone. He didn't move an inch. And I was very worried that maybe Lin was not feeling well, but he played. It was one of the best things he did.
Lin was a beautiful individual, a fine musician, and it was my honor and my pleasure to share the stand with him and all the musical knowledge that he had to offer.
He was, for me, he was a link, not just to the past, but I mean, he was the present, but he lived and took us to the meaning of what jazz was, what jazz is.
He just like turned out all these musicians, a lot of guys that are out like playing, you know, today, you know, got like their start playing with him at like the Get Me High. I mean, it's endless. I mean, I know Brad Good, learned a lot from him, and Brad Good was the guy that introduced me to him. You know, it's just, sure, like musicians, I mean, the guys that he like influenced in this town, it's got to be endless.
And then come back to Chicago. Next time I come to Chicago, here's this upstart Brad Good, young flaming red-haired trumpet player that everybody in town thought was Red Rodney's son. And even though they were no relation, but Brad was such a brilliant player that he started getting work around town. And who was it but Brad that got Lin working again? First couple of nights, and then 3 nights, and the next thing you know, they had a great quintet that I managed to catch in a little bar one night.
I went over to Get Me High, and needless to say, I was completely overwhelmed. I mean, here was this guy with a sound that you just, if you didn't hear it live, you just couldn't imagine it, because it was so big and warm and so clear. I mean, it was the type of sound that you know, associate with the greatest tenor saxophonist of all time.
As a rhythm section player, you felt when somebody was in front of you, your tension became highly piqued by this intangible thing called charisma. and Lin really had that both personally and artistically.
And when I was playing with him at the VU, he would play the same thing on a lot of tunes, the same exact licks, and they sounded just as incredible every time, the same exact notes.
I would remember Lin best as a teacher. When we were down in school, he brought his bebop to us and taught us how to play it correctly.
He was willing to share whatever he, whatever he knew or whatever he was doing that I didn't know with me, meaning, teaching me the tunes that he was playing, teaching me the chord changes, explaining, why such and such worked, why such and such didn't.
Can I have a beer, please?
Man, the cat was always sick or just getting real well, and always played awfully well.
It was a human being dealing with an unusual amount of struggles, even for a jazz musician, and for the most part, more often than not, overcoming them when he played his music.
He would show up at the club, and he would have a reed that was like petrified, crusted into his mouthpiece. It was the kind of thing that a normal saxophonist couldn't even manage or deal with. And this guy was such an incredible saxophonist that within 5 minutes, somehow he would have that equipment working, not only working, but just sounding phenomenal.